here we are. Here we are, we're ready for the final review. And I can't believe that it's already time. I mean, gadzooks, we just had our midterm. But that's how things work around here. And so let's go ahead and get started and review what we're going to do for the final exam, which is what this is all about, the final exam review. So first of all, just like the midterm, it's 1 week only. It starts Thursday, and we'll work through the Thursday of finals week. Let me emphasize, with 86 billion students on campus, that study center, which is, or not study centers, the testing lab, the testing center, will be jam-packed at finals time. They have in the past, and I'm sure they will continue this term, to have Saturday hours, so be sure and check their hours of operation. I encourage you that take the exam on Saturday. It'll just help. Your nerves will be frayed. You know, final exam time is a very strenuous and stressful time. And it's not just trying to remember what you need to know for everything, but it's just finding the right kind of schedule for it. Well, check on it, get the schedule, and I urge you to take the exam on Saturday. But nonetheless, it will open on Thursday and run through Thursday. Okay, that's what I just said. So there's our slide for it. Final exam begins Thursday and ends Thursday, and as it says there, be smart, take it early. There will be no makeup exams. It's almost impossible to get those things taken care of during the final time. And besides that, I don't give makeup exams, unless, of course, you read the fine print in the syllabus when your grandmother dies a third time. And make sure and check Saturday hours. I mentioned that. It's just like it was before. There will be 50 objective exams and 50 questions. I'm glad that reminded me. Forgot my little note I was going to take with me tonight, but this does remind me. I did go through every test because there was one test question that had the wrong answer on the answer sheet. And so I went through and I checked everybody's test. And so everybody has an additional point because I just went ahead and moved it forward, as it were. So in some cases, that made a change in the grade. In other cases, it didn't matter. But I did go through hand, one at a time, checking everyone's exam. And that was the idiot that made the answer sheet. Somehow, I don't know how that guy got away with that, because it was a real dumb-headed answer that was supposed to be the correct answer. So anyway, it is corrected, so we've gone through that. Okay. The exam, which made me, of course, go through the final exam and check it, and it seems to be okay. So 50 exam questions again, as with the midterm. The study guides are now available on Moodle. They will be available on Moodle through the week, so you can download those. This study guide is a little bit different. So I think when you check this one out, I think you'll probably think, gadzooks, Merry Christmas. I don't understand this. Anyway, you'll figure it out. Okay, remember, just as before, it's just a reminder, photo ID is required. Only one 3x5 note card, and remember, it can be front and back. And be sure to check and verify the hours of the testing lab. I emphasize that because I've had so many students in the past who don't do that. And they'll go and take the exam and say, I want to take the final exam when the place is closed. It doesn't work that way. Okay, extra credit. Now, extra credit, if you plan to do it, is due December 4th. So it's a week from tomorrow. Just take it to my office. If I'm not there for whatever reason, I'll be there. But if you just missed me by a minute or something, just slide it under the door and I'll get it. It's fine to do email submissions. You don't have to turn in the hard core or the hard copy. You can send an email. I would appreciate it if it comes as a Word attachment, a Word document. That way, when I do print them out, so that I do a better job of reading papers when I have them in front of me than trying to go off the screen. But that's okay. You can submit them online. But if you are going to mail in your paper, have it postmarked no later than November 30th, because you never know. You mail it on November 30th, and I'll get it, March 15th. Just at least you have the November 30th postmark on it. But anyway, December 4 is the due date. Now, if you're doing the video side of that, of course, I have to have the video. I'd like to see that on a disc. So just get that to me whenever you can by December 4th. Hand it to me or whenever. But I had a student last year, and I'm not that savvy with all this computer stuff, but he sent me a link where he had his movie up somewhere. It wasn't YouTube, but it was somewhere else. And if you can do that too, you can send me a link like that. I'll do it. I'll take a look at your movie. But you still have to write the paper part of that, giving me all this information about what you did, how you did the movie, and that sort of thing, according to what's on the syllabus. So anyway, it's December 4th is the deadline. What's on the test? Okay, we're going everything from the combat film all the way through television, film in the television, or actually all the way through the edge of Hollywood, and includes film noir and film in the television age. So let's take a look at what they call the combat film. The combat or war film, I have trouble calling it the combat film. It's always been the war film and forever will be the war film, except for them. They want to call it the combat film. The features of the genre: remember that laws and morality are suspended. Things get tough, and so you just have to suspend some things in order to win. Switch, this is the interesting thing, because what's interesting about it is when you think of a Western, an American Western, you think of one actor all at once, John Wayne. When you think of a Hollywood war movie, you think of one actor all at once, John Wayne. Okay? They always used to say John Wayne won the war single-handedly. Okay, so you have the same actor who appears in these films. Well, what's interesting is you have the same actor, John Wayne, in the Western, which is very much a celebration of the individual spirit, the lone cowboy. And then it switches for the combat film into what's important is the group, the troops. It's all for them. And the third point they brought up is women as emotional element that brings out male vulnerability. Okay, war movies are pretty much testosterone. That's all it is, boy. It's just really eating nails and being tough and all of that kind of thing. And there's nothing there, no room for a bleeding heart. And yet, in films, you bring in the female, the woman who suddenly melts the heart of that tough individual. Think of John Wayne again in one of his more famous war films called The Sands of Iwo Jima. And he is the tough as nails Sergeant Stryker that is going to plant that flag all by himself. And yet there's a very tender moment in the film when he meets who he thinks is pretty much a prostitute, which as it turns out, she was trying to get money, raise money, because she's got to raise this kid. And there's a tender moment when John Wayne, suddenly his heart melts. And it works for that characterization there. Okay, moving on. The combat war film. They certainly brought up this whole idea of anti-war sentiments and post-war films. While the movies are, or while the war is on, the movies are very much, I hate to say it, but it's kind of pro-war. What it means is it's pro-victory. What it means is we're making films for those at home saying we're going to win. You know, it's that sort of thing. After the war, and in some cases very immediately, like 1946, they start making films which show the other side of war, which show soldiers coming back who are, at that time, they called it shell-shocked. Soldiers who come back with limbs missing and their plight. War films and the portrayal of racial integration of armed forces. It's all for the cause. There are no differences. There are no religious differences. There are no racial differences. There are no cultural differences when you are thrown together and you're under attack. The issues of race and so forth, again, they get addressed after the war. The Men by Stanley Kramer is an excellent example of racial issues during the war. The combat war film states this: the fundamental American philosophy or ideology that's embedded in every war film, American war film, is this: we may not always win physically, but we are always right ideologically. We may not always win the battle, but we will win the war. The Office of War Information. This was the role of the United States government in Hollywood film production, the OWI. It was set up for the war. It had no existence before that time. And then in 1946, Truman abolished it because there was no reason to keep it. Its sole purpose was propaganda. And it shaped public opinion. The formula that they saw here that worked so well was for a film that they made during the war about a World War I hero named Sergeant York. And they called it the Sergeant York formula, which depicted the conversion of an objector to a supporter. That worked. So John Wayne brought it back in 1968. When you have Vietnam turning everything upside down, John Wayne comes out with a film that says, okay, we're going to make a film that supports these young men at that time. They didn't have women fighting, but the young men over there who are dying. And what are we doing over here? But what we're doing here is blaming them for all kinds of things that they have no control over. So he makes a movie called The Green Berets, and he uses the Sergeant York formula. A lot of people today look at the film and laugh at it because it seems to be a lot of flag waving. But at the same time, you look at it as a film historian and you go, hey, he's just doing what they did 40 years earlier, or 20 years earlier during the war. You know, he's trying to make a movie that says, okay, give these guys a break. And he sets it up by having this guy who is an objector, a journalist who hates the war, and joins the patrol to expose what kind of people they are, and by the time the movie's all over and done with, he has become a supporter. Film noir. The question that is asked is this: is film noir a true genre? That's one of those nice issues that'll never go away. Because some people say it's not a genre at all, it's just simply a style of movie making. It's the French word, it's a French phrase meaning black film. And what that means is when they started filming these things, like I say, it's like a style. Most everything was done at night. And to make it even better, it was done on rain-slick streets. They are adaptations of American pulp fiction and hard-boiled novels. They were discovered, that is, this type of film was discovered and debuted in post-war France. What it means is the French film critics, and we talk about those like the Cahiers du Cinéma people, they saw all of these American films that had the same kinds of scenes in them, and they began to write about them, and they began to describe them as black film. It's always done in black and white, and they always have these darkened streets and all of that sort of thing. And so that's where we get that. The people themselves who were making it were just making films, and they were making them the way they wanted to make them, at night, with settings that are urban, that's always in the city. I don't think you can make a film noir in the country. I think it's part of just being in the city center. However, some have tried, and again, they've tried by borrowing the image, by borrowing the night image, the light and shadow effect, and so forth. There are always rain-slick streets, and it's always the sleazy side of city life. Very sleazy side of it. Is there any other side in downtown? The themes, alienation. We see a lot of that. Usually the character himself, the private detective individual, is usually alienated from everything. Not just his society, but he's alienated from family, he's alienated from friends. There is definitely an existential attitude that runs throughout the films. That is, there's a no-win situation. You're not going to get out of it alive. The character types are amnesiacs. That's my favorite one. Black Angel, the whole thing is amnesia. That's what it's based on. Nobody can remember how this woman died. And antisocial loners. Another one of my favorites is Detour. It's made by the B Movie Studio Producers Releasing Corporation. And for 60 minutes, that whole movie is nothing but a downer. And this is where we first get a lot of the private detectives. The private detectives now that work outside of the law. That is, they're not bound by the law like your typical detective that works for the police department, but instead, private detectives. They beat a confession out of you. They do all of these kinds of things. So they are part of the kind of an underground. It's the film style that we usually like when we talk about film noir. The film style, there's low-key lighting. There are lots of shadowy elements. There are strange highlights, such as all you can see at times on a character might be just simply their mouth. As they talk, you don't see their eyes or anything. It's just the lighting is focused on their mouths. Extreme camera angles, high and low camera angles, distortion. Now, as I said, if that defines for us film noir, what I just said there also defines Citizen Kane. Low-key lighting, shadowy elements. When I say strange highlights, remember the reporter, Thompson? We never see his face. In a way, he is one of the main characters, if not the main character, in the sense that he tells us the story, because we follow Thompson all the way to find out who this guy Kane is, and never once do we see his face. The production code in film noir, this is where film noir also, it gets involved in the sleazy side of things. And film noir often alluded to prohibited subjects without directly violating the code. So it made, they were being naughty without being nasty. They were getting away with things, and the the production code allowed them. And then there are gender issues and film noir, especially women as femme fatales. The women in these films, they control everything. Not just their own lives, but everybody else's lives as well. In Black Angel, my favorite film noir, there's a strong woman in there, the central character, and she controls her destiny. And she also controls our sort of sympathetic character, the male. In Double Indemnity. In Double Indemnity, that one is a perfect film noir. It's considered the first one, by the way. And that woman in there, an unusual figure. Now, a lot of people, some of them argue that the reason we had the film noir is the film noir is a post-war phenomenon. And what some argue is it's the result of the women, of Rosie the Riveter, actually. That the women took the male role in the factories, did all this kind of work, and then the war ended, and it was like, oh, by the way, it's time for you to go back into the home, right? And they said, we like what we're doing here. And they said, yeah, but, what do you mean, but? We're staying, buddy. We're in control, kind of a thing. And so the post-war film noir sort of took that attitude where here's this, I can't believe it. This woman putting her foot down. I can't believe this. What's going on? How do we deal with this? And that's what the films were all about, because you had these women as femme fatales in control of themselves, and these men, the men characters in these films are going, what do we do? What do we do? Okay. The summary. Film noir is a social commentary on post-war reality, modern mass American culture, on consumerism and disillusionment with Paradise Lost. The world's changed. I better move on. Film in the television age. It's the post-war decline in attendance. It's marked by the threat of television, and it's marked by agreements between motion picture industry and the TV industry. In 1946, we had the largest attendance ever in movies. We had 90 million people went to the movies after the war, right immediately after the war. The soldiers came home, families went to the movies. By 1950, we were barely had 40 million going. Okay, what happened? Many things. It's not just television. More leisure time, more money, interest in other activities, and migration to the suburbs. Movie theaters were always in downtown areas. When you moved out to the suburbs, it took a little more effort to go down to see the movies. So they weren't going as often. Television said, no, we're not going to deal, or I'm sorry, movies said no, television. Many of the studios, they required their actors to sign contracts that said, I will not appear on television. It was war until they discovered that, boy, we can sure sell a lot of our movies on television. Movie industry's response to competition from television and decline in attendance, very interestingly, is that it was a technical innovation. They decided that the television screen was this dinky little thing, and in the beginning, television screens were round and they looked like a porthole. They're about like that. So movies said, come on down to the movies and we'll give you big screens, including wide screen. So Cinerama is developed, which gives you peripheral vision. Then 3D, they start throwing things at you. And then they create the poor man's Cinerama called CinemaScope, which was still wide, but not as wide as Cinerama. And Panavision comes along and refines it and makes it perfect for the wide screen. Understand what is meant by aspect ratio, width to height of projected image, and recognize what is meant when we try to see widescreen movies today. Back in the old days, they used to call it panning and scanning, one of the worst things you could ever see. It used to drive me crazy. And then they created letterboxing. Okay, other creative innovations. Subject matter. A small independent studio, American International, developed at a time when all movies were falling apart, when studios were closing. And what did they discover? The teen market. What do they call that? Market research? Is that what that's called, I think? Market research. They went out and discovered that most of the people going to movies were teenagers. Why not make movies for teenagers? So they start making these crazy movies like Shake, Rattle, and Rock, utilizing the music of the youth. And then they discovered something that was perfect. They were meant for each other. Teenagers and monsters. They put together these movies that involved teenagers and monsters. One of the most phenomenal films of that era, 1957, was I Was a Teenage Werewolf with Michael Landon. They made it for some unbelievable price, like $70,000, and it grossed bazillions. The monsters were products of low-budget studios. It was low-budget exploitation. It was they were usually made by independent producers, and it, boom, box office boffo. It was making money right and left. We look at these movies today, and we call them cult films. They usually have real shoddy special effects. You know, everybody laughs at it, but they were still movies that had a story to tell, and they were told in a certain way. And in some cases, they would say, we gotta show it. It's movies, and if we're gonna, you know, even if they are only little tabletop models or flying saucers that are or tin pie plates glued together or whatever, we're gonna do what we can to show them. The film school generation. This is the two 1960s. In the beginning, you have sex comedies with Rock Hudson, Doris Day, Tony Randall, called Love or Come Back, that goes all the way to the end of the 60s with a new kind of sex comedy called The Graduate. And I'm not going to go through all of this stuff. It's on the study guide. This is all the kinds of new wave things, you know, the Cahiers du Cinema, the newer filmmakers, that sort of thing. At the edge of Hollywood, become familiar with modern filmmakers and example of their works. The ones who are kind of old filmmakers now, Lucas, Spielberg, Scorsese, etc., and also the filmmakers on the fringes, for example, Julie Dash. And remember that a movie just ain't a movie anymore. Not like it was. What is it? Get through this. It's this. It's the new media. You have HBO. You have VCRs that, you know, and those other recording things. Cable TV, HD TV. A major growth here of the home viewing audience and the effect on the movie industry. New media are key subsidiary outlets for motion pictures, and as such are critical to movie industry success. It's the horizontal control kind of a thing now. Like that, a movie just isn't a movie, but it also has little figures and all that sort of thing. Okay, that's it. Remember all this stuff about photo ID, blah, blah, blah. Those things, look at that. It's time to say good night, because I hear the music. That's it. Bye. And my voice is gone.